Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for attending our monthly webinar series. My name is Crystal, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Mobile Cause. Around here, we believe that your cause is our cause, so we host these free live training sessions to help give you the support you need in running your organization, planning fundraising initiatives, and connecting with your donors. I'm very excited about today's topic, building your annual fundraising game plan. Our goal today is to provide you with ideas that allow you to efficiently plan out your yearly fundraising goals and offer direction on strategy and tactics that can make the most impact. Our esteemed speakers will be covering the building blocks of annual fundraising, how to create your fundraising game plan, and how you can turn your plan into action. Then we'll have an open Q&A session at the end where you can submit questions. You can write questions in the questions pane on your control panel, and we'll address as many as we can at the end. We will be sending a recording of this webinar along with the slides after the session. So without further ado, let me introduce today's panel of speakers. So Christy Noel is the Vice President of Digital Marketing Services here at Mobile Cause. Christy works closely with our customers on developing and implementing fundraising and communication initiatives. We have found that our customers raise 54% more money when they work with Christy and her team. Xanika Covington is a digital strategist, also here at Mobile Cause. Xanika works with our customers to implement new and effective ways of fundraising and donor engagement across both traditional and digital channels. And our special guest today is Molly Snow. Molly is the Executive Director at Girls on the Run. Molly has helped organizations reignite passion for their mission, build sustainable and diverse revenue streams, and create successful approaches to fund development. Thank you to all the panelists for joining us today. I will now turn it over to Xanika in creating a fundraising game plan. Xanika, are you up?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. I'm here to talk about building a fundraising game plan. So the first thing you'll want to do in building an annual fundraising game plan is create a calendar. And here you'll want to start with filling in key dates for the year. So for example, if you have a gala in the spring and a gala in the fall, you'll want to add these in first, and really any keynote events that you know you'll be having. So the idea here is that if you plan out the things you know for sure will be happening and you're well organized, then you'll be well set up to capitalize on spontaneous opportunities, such as partner events with other organizations or sponsorship events. You'll want to add in strategic milestones and make them coincide with events where appropriate. So for example, if you have a gala in the fall and you'd like to do a crowdfunding campaign in the lead up to this event, so that you can, highlight key fundraisers at the event or display a total raised so far, you'll probably want to start a volunteer acquisition drive at least 4 months prior. So the idea here is that, acquiring volunteers helps you have people willing to crowdfund, which would make a crowdfunding campaign more successful, which would give your gala more hype. There are some things that you want to keep in mind as you're building your calendar. And basically, things to keep in mind, this is sort of everything but the event. So for instance, if you have a large gala coming up, you'll want to plan at least 2 to 3 months out to solidify keynote speakers, create the run of show for the event, and start solidifying sponsors for the event. If you're doing a live text to donate at the event, you'll want to ensure there's adequate cell coverage in the venue. Of course, you'll want to prep AV, create any video content that you'll be incorporating in the show, etc. If one of your major fundraising pushes isn't a live event, you'll still want to plan at least 2 months out to solidify brand ambassadors and key individuals who can help promote your cause. You'll also want to determine the various communication platforms that you'll be utilizing to get the word out about your cause. And this leads me to the next point, which is about communication planning. So This is really critical, and unfortunately, this is where a lot of nonprofits don't spend the bulk of their time. Really, it doesn't matter if you have a fantastic event from start to finish. If people don't know about it, they're not going to be there. So you need to spend an almost equal amount of time prepping for your various communications and platforms as you would actually spend planning the event itself. So how do you do this? I like to start by thinking about who your target demographic is for each fundraising initiative. So for example, if you're hosting a formal sit-down event with high-level individuals and the goal is to obtain larger gifts, you may want to create more personalized outreach. If you know key individuals in your network pretty well, you can cater the platform of communication to their preference. So if someone isn't too tech savvy or prefers direct mail, maybe you send them a personalized invite that way. If you're doing a virtual event and your aim is to grow your donor base by encouraging smaller gifts, you may want to emphasize social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, and the like to tap into the 20-something demographic. Of course, none of the communication platforms you choose need to be exclusive. And by that, I mean that you'll want to actually incorporate various communication platforms around a specific initiative. So it's usually some combination of email, social media posts, text, and direct mail that yield a high attendance or donation rate. And on that point too, this isn't to make you over communicate or spam your audience. The easiest way to test out a good cadence of communication with your donors is actually to put yourself in their shoes and send all of the communications that you would send to them to yourself at the cadence that you plan to communicate with your audience with. So this can take a while, of course, and that's why we recommend planning ahead so that if you send 5 emails to yourself, you're like, maybe our donors don't need that many, you realize that this isn't working ahead of time and you can change course so that when you actually do start communicating with your donors, you are prepared. So let's look at a few examples. Here in front of us, we have a dinner gala calendar. So this is a pretty standard calendar for a sit-down event. Of course, 2 to 3 months out, you'll want to set up everything that needs to be in place for the event to run smoothly and successfully. So you'll be organizing the venue, but you'll want to start creating tickets and invitations and getting those out. If you'll be doing a raffle or auction, you'll want to solidify the items you'll be selling and determine, how to work the auction or raffle into the run of show. You'll want to create your fundraising thermometer if you're doing a live text to donate and prepare the text to donate form. And really, you just want to get all of the technical and logistical elements in place so that you can spend the next 1 to 2 months promoting. So promoting, of course, is very important. Something that we recommend here is creating compelling video content if possible. Photos and testimonials are also a terrific way to showcase your upcoming event and promote it across, the communication platforms that you determined in your communication planning stage. You'll want to be collecting RSVPs and invitations, and this is also a good opportunity to solidify table captains at your event based on who's able to attend. 1 to 7 days out is when you want to, of course, remind everybody. You've got everything ready, and now let's make sure that we're getting all of our attendees to the event. So even for people that decline the event, if they're going to be out of town or if they just can't make it with a schedule conflict, there's definitely an opportunity for you to create a way for them to still be involved. And we really like to emphasize this. We recommend communicating with non-attendees and letting them know how they can stay up to date with the event, even if they can't make it. So you can, tell them to go live on Facebook at a certain day and time, and they can watch you guys live from the event then. And you can also give them a way to contribute. A lot of people, especially if they're pretty involved with your organization and they can't make it, they would like to make a financial gift to contribute. So make sure that you're creating a way for them to do so. Day of, this is all about inspiring donors to give. And this should be the ultimate objective of the event, inspiring your donors. So you can do this by showcasing the impact of their contribution, conducting a live call to action with a progress bar that displays the total raised live at the event, recognizing donors in person at the event. Of course, that's a fantastic thing to do, and tweeting and posting on social media as you go along. So you could have, someone on staff texting out quotes from a keynote speaker, Some organizations even go live on Instagram, Snapchat, or Facebook from the event, which is pretty cool. And this is a great way to inspire out-of-towners and non-attendees to give and make them feel like, they're there even though they're not physically there. Once the event is ended, you'll want to spend the next 1 to 3 days following up with incomplete gifts and encouraging donors to fulfill. And of course, 1 to 2 weeks after, you'll want to let donors know how their contribution has advanced your various programs. And this is very key. A lot of people, organize events and they put so much work into getting everyone there that they kind of just, kick back afterwards and relax. But this is really your best opportunity to cultivate the donors that were able to make it. And in another example, we'll look at a run or walk. So a lot of organizations with runs or walks incorporate a peer-to-peer fundraising element. So 2 to 3 months out here, you'll want to create the registration forms. If you're going to be, giving out T-shirts at the event, collecting T-shirt sizes, solidifying the venue, and the day of logistics and run of show. If you are incorporating peer-to-peer fundraising with your walk run, you'll want to prep the campaign to launch. So that includes recruiting volunteer fundraisers and getting them pumped to start fundraising for your initiative. You'll want to create the instructions for your fundraisers. So for example, give them weekly goals to work towards. So something like, including more participants in the run or walk, or encouraging small gifts. Maybe it's just gifts of $5 to obtain a higher quantity of new donors, or maybe you're just giving your volunteer fundraisers a financial goal. Like this week, we want everyone to try and raise, $500. 4 to 5 weeks out, this is when you'll want to actually be running the peer-to-peer campaign, if you've decided to do this, and promoting your event by encouraging registrations for the day of. This is also a great time to highlight teams or specific individuals in your outreach to encourage additional participants. And 1 to 7 days out, again, is when you want to remind everybody. So you can identify top fundraisers and teams so far. If you've had a team or a fundraiser that's kind of just gone for it and raised a lot of money, maybe you want to actually highlight them at the event and work this into your run of show so that they can be acknowledged the day of. And you'll want to communicate outwards about how much of the goal has been raised so far, so that donors know, coming into the event, what the goal is, what the gap is between what's been raised and what you're hoping to walk away with. Day of, again, this is all about inspiring your donors and your participants. So you'll want to have members of your organization be communicating live updates on social media and text. Again, this is another great opportunity to go live from Facebook or Instagram, and you can actually go live from the finish line and film participants as they cross. Pretty fun and interactive. You can also create hashtags or geotags on Snapchat if you're familiar with that, and encourage participants to post on their social media pages with the hashtags and geotags so that people who are in their network who may not know about you are still becoming aware of the cause. You'll want to display the thermometer or the progress bar and encourage participants to help reach your goal. And then 1 to 3 days after, again, you want to thank everybody who participated and fundraised and came out. It's really awesome here to create a highlight reel with video footage from the event and share this on social media, email, text. And of course, you'll want to send personal thank yous to key fundraisers and participants. Maybe highlight them in your general email communications. And then in a final example, we'll look at something that is typically not an in-person event. So the previous two that we've looked at are in-person events. Now we'll look at something that is more like a Giving Tuesday or year-end appeal campaign. So even though this campaign may only be 1 day or a couple days long, you'll still want to begin prepping about 2 to 3 months out. So you'll want to start by setting up and customizing a donation form so that that's ready to go and kind of get all the technical elements set up, and then recruit your brand ambassadors. So particularly with virtual or really short campaigns, it's very helpful to have public figures there to kind of represent your organization. So whether it be key individuals in the community or athletes or celebrities, you'll want to find people willing to help you promote and equip them with sample scripts or key points for them to highlight as they endorse your organization. Again, 1 to a few weeks out, you'll want to promote. So Something to keep in mind here is that, there's lots of other organizations that are gearing up for similar giving days. So your donors are likely going to be receiving email communications from them as well. So here you'll want to try to emphasize what sets you apart, tell your story, emphasize the donor always, and get them amped to contribute to you on the big day. In the week leading up to the campaign, you want to ensure that your donation form is set up, that all the buttons and links and embeds that you have are consistent across all platforms so that you don't have any technical hiccups. And then that way too, you're ensuring that all incoming donations are attributed to the same goal or progress bar. And of course, send reminders to create a countdown so that people are definitely aware of the big day when it comes. And the day of, again, inspire. So repeat your call to action across all communication channels until the goal is reached. Definitely recognize donors in real time using a thermometer, share updates of the goal on social channels, and if possible, and this is not available to all organizations, but I encourage you to think creatively about special incentives that you can give to people if possible. So, if you have swag bags at your disposal or coupons or some kind of discount, freebies are always an added incentive for donors. And of course, 1 to 3 days later, you're going to want to thank everybody who contributed. So share the final results. Don't be shy to do this, whether you smash your goal or you come in under it. It's still good to report outward about that, especially if, maybe you were under your goal, but people know that you came under and now they're maybe more inclined to make a larger gift next time around. And of course, you'll want to do an internal recap to determine, what worked and what didn't. So with that, I would like to hand it over to Molly, the Executive Director of Girls on the Run, and she will kind of put everything I just said into a real life example. Molly, are you there?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Xanika, and thank you to Mobile Cause for inviting me to participate in this webinar. Probably not coincidentally, some of our greatest successes at Girls on the Run have come from utilizing the very best practices that Mobile Cause is sharing today through this webinar. And for us, they've led to growth and more sustainable revenues. So I'm really excited to share our approach to planning and activation of our fundraising strategies. So for a little bit of context, Girls on the Run of Los Angeles is a local chapter of a national organization. We offer a 10-week after-school enrichment program that promotes the social, emotional, and physical well-being of girls who are ages 8 to 14. And the overarching goal of the program is to improve self-esteem and self-efficacy of these young women. Nationally, this program rolled out in 1996. Locally, we've been here in Los Angeles since 2004. For organizational size, to have a little bit of perspective, we are a staff of 5 and we have an operating budget of just under $500,000. I joined on 6 years ago as the first full-time paid executive director. And since that time, we have more than doubled our revenue and we have tripled our program reach. And for us, when we talk about program reach, that is measured in the number of girls we serve annually. So this year, 2017, we are on track to serve more than 2,000 girls. What I love about the tips shared so far in terms of creating an annual fundraising plan is that the overarching process really can be applied to any fundraising platform. So there are a few bullets here of the platforms that are responsible for a lot of our revenue at Girls on the Run, but the same process can be applied, as Xanika outlined, to galas. It can also be applied to foundation grants, endowments, or basically any fundraising platform that you're using would benefit and be strengthened through the use of these planning steps. For us here at Girls on the Run in Los Angeles, our fiscal year is our calendar year. And I mention that because that is relevant to when we start our planning process. For us, we start no later than September of the current year for planning for the next year. The way that this process starts, we really do try to follow a pattern that has worked for us, which is starting by looking at our fundraising trends over the past, probably 2 to 3 years, and looking at the performance by line item to to not only see what past performance has looked like, but to see how it might inform our future activities and results. Once we kind of have a sense of how each individual line item is performing or has performed, we then take a look at a few other factors, including what is our projected growth for the year that we are planning, and just what other external factors might be changing or come into play that we would want to consider before we set our fundraising goals. So as an example of how that works for us, let's say in 2016, our individual giving goal, looking just at individual giving, let's say that was $55,000. And in 2017, let's say we're on track for that to be $65,000, which would be about an 18% increase. And then on top of that, in 2018, we're anticipating or projecting a 15% overall growth in our program. It's reasonable for us to assume that if we're growing the program, we're growing our overall base, and with that, our revenue grows. So with that in mind, our formula would get us to maybe, let's say, for purposes of an example, $75,000 individual giving goal, right? So that's sort of the first step in the process. So now we do this for each line item. We come up with our top line goal. And then once we have that, we want to make it actionable. So we're a small organization. And for us to say we're just going to come up with $75,000 in individual giving is lovely, but it's not actionable. And we want to have some real parameters to know where that's going to come from. So at this point, we implement a second step. I talk about our fundraising planning approach as both a forward and backward looking approach. So when we're forward looking, that's what I just described, where we use projections for growth to establish the goal. The backward looking part is sort of where we back into the goal that we just came up with to make sure that it's actionable, to make sure the goal is vetted, and that ideally it is achievable. That's kind of important. So with this second step, we break down our goals into actions that have their own smaller goals. So to give you another example, sticking with that whole individual giving premise, if we said that $75,000 was going to be our individual giving goal for 2018, we want to know where that actually is going to come from. How do we get to that number? So we're going to break it down. Maybe the first thing we say is we know we have a small number of individual donors, major donors, who give on average $2,000 each. Our organization is at a size where we can pretty readily identify those people, and right off the bat, we pull them out and say, well, okay, that's worth about $20,000 towards our total $75,000 goal. And then on this slide, if you look at individual giving, the bullets, you can see we have some other actions, and we'll assign the similar amount to each of those. So in this example, let's just say, hypothetically, re-engaged lapsed donors, that's going to yield about $10,000 in additional revenue. We're going to have a targeted campaign just for our volunteers. At Girls on the Run of Los Angeles, we have over 800 volunteers a year. So maybe it's realistic to say we can get another $10,000 from that group and from that effort. And then looking at the third bullet, we have a monthly giving plan. We feel that it's time to expand that, and we're going to focus some of our communications on that. And we feel like we can get that to $10,000 for the year. And now we have a total of $50,000 accounted for. Hopefully you're following my math since it's not showing on the screen, but basically 50 of the 75 is now accounted for, leaving us with $25,000. And we still have the last bullet, which is 2 online campaigns to launch. I think everyone in the nonprofit world knows or has had the experience of year-end giving being the greatest time for giving overall. And so it's not absurd to think that a large portion of our revenue would come in through a campaign at the end of the year. So the way we would look at this is we do run 2 campaigns. The mid-year campaign is usually a pretty small effort. Maybe that's going to bring in about $5,000. And then the year-end campaign, which includes Giving Tuesday, is going to bring in about $20,000. That's the last $25,000 that we need to get us to the $75,000 total individual giving goal. And we do this for every single one of the buckets you see here. We go through and assign the actions that will get us to whatever the larger goal was. because this allows us the opportunity to say, well, you know what, this isn't realistic. If we have set that goal too high, we might find that out through this process. And then we have to either reassess and lower that goal and then look at our expenses again, or maybe we say, yeah, we haven't gotten to the 75 yet, but let's implement one more effort to get us to 75, and we feel like that's a great use of our resources. This whole two-step process gets us to what we think are our best estimates for revenue for the year. And I am sure that most nonprofits feel a little bit the way we do, which is it does sometimes feel a little bit like a guessing game, but having a process helps us feel like there are real milestones in place to help us achieve. It also gives us an opportunity to re-examine at the mid-year. So we know what we have said each effort is supposed to bring in. If we are not meeting our goals, our sub-goals throughout the year, we have a chance to re-examine and rejigger, and we can change our operations to meet the changing needs of whatever our fundraising environment might be. The other thing that's really cool about this approach and that works for us is it allows us to build out the specifics like tactics and timelines. So in fact, these next 3 slides will illustrate how we build out the tactics for individual efforts, but also strive to assure that our fundraising efforts are seamlessly integrated into our overall organizational activities. So Xanika alluded to this as well. We are a mission-oriented organization. We aren't a fundraising organization, so we do other things. And so what we want to make sure of is that our fundraising efforts become whole and integrated with any other messages and activities of the organization. So let's go back to the individual giving example that I was using. This screen right here shows how our tactical planning can get very, very granular. What this does for us is it allows us to pre-plan. So now we have prep time. We can plan and write out our messages, and we can create any supporting materials that we want to use, whether it's through social media or regular mail. This allows us to see what materials we need and get a jump on that. And then if we take a look at the next slide, we want to make sure that the campaign plans that we just talked about that are very granular. They don't live in a bubble. You know, donor cultivation and engagement definitely deepen when you include your donors or potential donors in the activities on an ongoing basis. And that means, you know, for us, we do not always ask for a donation. So when before we create all of our calendars, we look at how our operations have created naturally occurring touch points that we can leverage to stay in communication with donors, both new and returning. So whatever your mission, I'm sure you have similar touch points that you can use to engage donors. For us, it just happens to work out that monthly, quarterly, and seasonally timelines mirror the way that our program operates. And so it creates great opportunities for us to invite all of our, not just donors, but our entire base into what our mission and our work. And then lastly, in terms of calendaring, you want to make sure that, or I should say what we try to make sure of is that we include engagement messages in our total calendar. So it's not just a calendar of fundraising efforts and donation requests, but the engagement bits are built into the calendar as we set up for the year. This has allowed us to have some flexibility. So we try to set it up enough in advance that if things change throughout the year, we already know what the plan was and we can look ahead and see where we might change the plan. And it also allows us to see how many communications we're sending to help us avoid the trap of our own messages crowding each other, right? I mean, I think opting out of emails is really easy for people to do, and it's the last thing we want since it's the main way we communicate with our audiences. So, you know, finally, I just wanted to share a few stats. As you may recall, the title of this section of this session was called Success Story. And so I wanted to share a few of our successes that we've had during my tenure. And I will say that while our overall growth has definitely fueled our growth in revenue, I have found that by developing and implementing these best practices around our fundraising, it has been enormously helpful, both in the early stages, but even more especially as we grow, as we get larger. Having a process in place really allows us to be more efficient and more effective, I think, in our fundraising efforts. And in addition to that thoughtful planning, what has helped Girls on the Run of Los Angeles build revenue has been the process of not just following a planning process, but taking an honest look every single year at what's working, where we have momentum, and what areas we think are most likely to either sustain themselves or grow. I don't think anyone is asking for my advice, but if I were going to give some anyway, I would say really don't be afraid to try new things, especially if they are low-cost things to increase your revenue. And also don't be afraid to dump old ideas that are no longer efficient or effective as you go through this planning process. Figure out where you want to apply your resources and focus on those areas where you know you're gaining momentum and you can create a more sustainable revenue stream. I think that's it. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Christy.
Thank you, Molly. That was great and so helpful to understand the success of the effectiveness of an annual plan. And the beginning of that process, Molly mentioned, starts for Girls on the Run in September for an annual plan. And so you can see there was an awful lot of work that went into putting together the strategies and the tactics and the really the day-to-day planning and calendaring. And Xanika did a great job of showing us what that looks like too. But really the starting process begins at building the base of the plan and the building blocks that create the foundation so you have a really strong plan and you have the ability to weather any storm that might come, like building a house, right? There's a really strong foundation, and that's what we want to do with an annual plan as well, so that we continue to drill down in getting from the solid base and the looking behind to getting down up to the tactics and being able to make adjustments along the way. A goal without a plan is just a wish, which is a saying from a French philosopher, I believe. And I think in nonprofit, we all have a lot of goals and we certainly do a lot of wishing. But here is where we're going to talk about how do you make that plan so that you have those blocks to stand on. And while I was putting together this presentation, I heard a commercial that said, "From where you are to where you will be." And I thought that was really great for what we're talking about here, because block number one is looking back before we can look ahead. So we're going to look at where we are so we can look at where we will be. So one of the first things you might want to take a look at with your organization is to sit down and do a SWOT analysis. Look at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And when you're putting together this quadrant and filling it out, you can do it by yourself. You can involve your staff or your volunteers or your board and get input. It's always a really eye-opening exercise when I go through it. But look at it from where you are in the nonprofit world, where you are in your sector or your specific vertical, and then where you sit within your community as you look at this. And this will really help you understand what you have that's working, what you can have the opportunity to improve. And when you get to the resources section of planning, it will really help you identify what you might need and what you have that you can take additional advantage of. And you also want to look at, as Molly mentioned, looking back to see what you've done strategically and tactically that has worked. And really drill down and figure out, why did it work? Ask yourself and try to do some analysis of what were the key factors that went into that success. And on the flip side, what didn't work? We all like to think that we hit home runs every time we have a new initiative or program, and unfortunately that doesn't always happen. So for those misses, really ask yourself and dig deep and what went wrong? Was it implementation? Was it a bad idea? Was it lack of something that if you had it, more resources, more help, that you may have succeeded? And really understand those two elements so that you can put that into the plan and make a better, stronger plan going forward. The second building block of your annual plan is to set your goals. And Molly did a great job of outlining how she approaches the goals with Girls on the Run, and I couldn't agree more. We want them to be actionable, attainable, and mostly measurable. Because once you set those goals, you're going to be asked to report on them, most likely. So make sure they are something that you have the ability to measure against, and that you have the tools to measure against them. And we're not talking about expenses and revenues. That's your budget. We're talking about the goals of the organization. And your first thought is probably fundraising, and your first thought is probably right, or revenue of some sort, whether that's grants or sponsorships or individual giving or corporate giving. We all need that revenue stream to come in to sustain our organization. But beyond just your fundraising or your revenue goals, there might be some other really important goals for your organization to achieve your success. And that could be like getting more donors. Maybe there's a percentage increase or a number of donor increase that you need to achieve going forward. Or maybe it's that you need to get a percentage of your base to donate. Last year, maybe you had 45% of the people in your base donated, and this year you want to increase that to 65% or something along those lines. Maybe it's a goal regarding recurring donations, and you're going to try and increase the number of recurring donations that you see on a monthly, quarterly, or annually basis. Or maybe it's to decrease donor churn, and you want to make sure that your donors remain consistent, and how do you engage them so that they are continuing to donate to your organization and you don't have to go out and find new donors to keep putting into the mix. So now that we know that they have to be measurable, and you need to make sure you can measure them, and you have the tools to do that and the milestones to know when to check on it. And that might be part of your plan as well. Are these goals that you should be looking at on a quarterly basis? Maybe they're a biannual basis, something so that if you need to make adjustments, you have the time and the runway to tweak your plan. You don't want to wait till the end of the year to find out that you were a little off track, or you even overperformed, and you could have made adjustments along the way too. The third building block is looking at your resources. And again, money is a key driver in resources for nonprofits. And absolutely, you need to make sure you have the revenue coming in to spend and invest as needed. But we're also looking at the resources that are beyond monetary. And so I would say, ask yourself, if money wasn't an issue, what do you need to run your organization? Do you have the software and the technology in place to do that? Maybe you need a new CRM system. Maybe you need a CRM system. Maybe this is the year to get out of Excel and to upgrade to some type of CRM system, or an email service provider, or maybe you need the ability to text to your constituents. So, or some type of special software program to help you do your job. So looking at the technology and the software, looking at your expertise and special skills. Is this the year that you need additional insurance and you need to find somebody that can help you in being an expert in what's going on in policies? Or maybe you have some legal needs, and where do you get some legal advice or volunteers or a cost-effective lawyer? And potentially that could also be a tax person or somebody to help you with an audit or something like that. What type of people resources do you need? And that could be staff, board members. Do you need to increase your board? Do you need to increase your volunteer base? So really looking at what's missing and what's needed, and trying to identify how you can pull those additional resources into your organization. And as important as all the money and the expertise and the technology is, you really can do a lot with really passionate volunteers. So don't underestimate your ability to really turn your organization around and get some momentum by using a passionate team of volunteers. They can run programs for you. They can become fundraisers. They can be out in the community recruiting fundraisers, recruiting volunteers, recruiting donors. They can sell tickets to events. And so there's this whole ability for you to capture and that enthusiasm for your organization. And a lot of times what the volunteer can deliver is more important than the monetary value of a donation. I'll give you an example. One of our clients teaches coding to young students, and their volunteers come from Silicon Valley technology companies. So you have these volunteers who are Facebook employees going to volunteer their time and teaching young kids to code so that they can become, have great career aspirations in development going forward. And the time invested, the volunteer hours that these people provide is so valuable to this organization, far more than most likely that the donations would be similar to. So tapping into that enthusiasm and ability and that expertise to help with your organization can be really rewarding and fulfilling and not very high expense. As you're putting together your annual plan, one thing that we encourage you to keep in mind is step number 4, and that is being donor centric. Essentially, our donors make our world go round. So we want to make sure that they are center of everything that we do, and our programs revolve around them. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when we're communicating, it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. Just as most likely when you have a new boss, you don't always expect your boss to work with the way you've always worked. You probably have to change your ways a little bit and adapt to your new boss. And that's how we work with donors. We don't want the donor to have to adhere to the way we've always done things. We want to make ourselves adaptable to how the donor would like to be communicated with. So if maybe your donors love direct mail, but maybe some of them don't look at their mail. They're more into email or social media, or they're texting. So if by providing all of those communication tools, you're more likely to have a higher open rate, a higher readability of your communications, and higher engagement with your donors. So open up all those channels so that you have the ability to truly engage and connect with your donors. And same with donations. If the only way they can donate with is writing a check, you're probably missing out on some donations. So make sure you are providing an online option, maybe PayPal, checks in cash. Can you swipe a credit card? Is there a way for them to provide that credit card information safely and securely directly to you? So again, increase your likelihood of being successful in getting as many donations as possible by making it easy for the donor and letting them have the choice of what works best for them. Once you have engaged them through communication or donations, then you want to continue to talk to them and share your story and involve them in your story. Share videos on the great work you're doing and where their money is making a difference. Did you raise money to build a new building or a school? Share it with them. Show pictures. Show kids at the school. Show how the impact has been made if you have patients or students. How is that? Research. What's become of, what progress have you made throughout the year? And you can use those patients, those students, those clients to make fun thank you cards, or write a personal note to really personalize the thank you and make your donor really connected to your cause in a one-on-one way that really will draw them in and want them to continue to follow your organization and continue to be involved and provide donations. And you can also thank and recognize them throughout the year. It doesn't have to be just at the time of donation. Obviously, you need to do that, but you could have ways to, not everybody loves public recognition, but a lot of people do. So maybe you recognize people on your social media or through an email blast, or maybe you have milestones where if people raise or donate a certain amount of money, they get to name something or start the race, or whatever fun ways you can involve your donors, and then share that with everybody else that that these programs are available and who's participating in them. And that way, it's more than just an individual thank you, it's a broad public thank you. And again, sometimes you want to ask and make sure that everybody's comfortable with that, but it really gets the donor involved in your organization on a different level and makes them really part of your community and show how important they are. So now we've looked at the past, we know it worked, we know what we can improve, we've got our goals, we know what resources available, we know we need to stay focused on our donor, and now we're really driving into the strategies of what's going to drive our plan for the upcoming year. And some of the strategy examples we provided is you might be looking at how to increase your direct response by 20%, let's say, because now you're going to send both mail and email in tandem. Or maybe you're going to use segmentation of your database to tap into a segment that you really haven't had success in communicating or cultivating in the past. Maybe it's working on your thank yous and doing it more consistently, more quickly, and creatively to continue to engage. Maybe this is the year you want to use video to really tell your story and make an impact. Video is a quicker way to connect emotionally than anything that's written. Reading is very intellectual and doesn't necessarily, it takes the brain longer to process emotionally than video. So putting video into your programs, whether that's in your social media or your email or on your website, in your presentations and your programs, using your phone to take selfies and putting together quick little videos can make such a difference, and people watch them. So you have a great way to get people to see your mission and see your organization and see your success. And this is the opportunity to really go back to your resources, and understanding what you have and what you need is critical to developing your strategies. And as you're putting together your strategies, make sure you are also allowing yourself time to review them throughout the year so you can adjust as needed. As Molly said, you want to try some things that are new, and you want to be willing to toss out the things that aren't working. So you want to know that you have the ability to make adjustments throughout the year. Which leads us to step number 6, the final step, and that is identifying the tactics to implement to get to all the great work going forward. And Xanika and Molly have already done a beautiful job of showing some of the tactics, so I won't spend too much time here, but just starting with your strategies, building out the tactics to support it. So from a quick example of, if you're looking to increase your direct response by 20% because you are going to send via mail and email, looking at, do you have the tools to do that? Do you have everything in place? Backing into, when do I need to start looking at that, the calendaring that we spent so much time talking about. How long does it take to write them, and build that into your planning and your calendaring? What are the themes? What's the content? You don't have to write them all now, but just know that you are looking ahead and putting together the tactics and the calendar to support that. So as Molly said, one of the main things you want to do is you're not communicating over yourself with different messages and different campaigns and different strategies. And similar to your strategies, when you get to the tactical level, you want to allow yourself the ability to look at them throughout the year, measure your success against your plan, and modify as necessary. Where you start your plan may not be the exact same plan you're going to have at the end of the year, but you want to start with a very strong, solid plan and have the ability to make adjustments as needed. Where you're succeeding, you want to spend more time and resources to continue doing that. And maybe the things that didn't take off as you thought, allow yourself the ability either to remove them from the plan or maybe make adjustments and try to turn the tide a little bit on them. So we have the 6 steps for building your plan, which then goes into the tactical side, which Xanika covered so beautifully with some calendaring. And then Molly showed us really superb real-life examples with Girls on the Run of Los Angeles County. So wrapping that all together, we recommend you have your solid plan and starting early and working back from key dates that you already have on the calendar and understanding your resources, keeping focused with the donor at the center of your plan so that they are valued and involved and make hopefully less work for you and more success for you as well. And then to continue looking at your plan and analyzing it, looking at your results and making adjustments. We all want to make sure we succeed, and the best way to do that is to have the ability and the willingness to recognize where we have the opportunity to tweak and improve and then run with it. So with that, thank you again to Molly and Xanika. Best of luck in your planning for 2018 and beyond. And I think we might have a little time for any questions from the audience. Crystal?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Christy, and thank you to Molly and Xanika. We do have just a few questions. The first question is for Molly. This is from Sarah, and Sarah asks, what would be a way to engage board members in a major fundraiser?
That is a fantastic question, Sarah, and I want to just start by saying all of the executive directors I have that I know here in Los Angeles or through Girls on the Run would like an answer to this question as well. So, you know, typically board members are not experienced professional fundraisers. So what we do here in Los Angeles to engage them is try to increase their level of comfort with the idea of fundraising overall, and we do that all year long. And then when it comes to a particular campaign, the way that we ask the board members to engage and that we encourage them to get comfortable with this whole idea is by sharing with them all of the materials of the campaign. So they have an understanding of how the campaign will run, what's the theme of the campaign, when are the asks going to hit, and we'll supply them with any materials that support that. So it's not happening in a vacuum, and it's not just happening at the operational level, but it's also happening at the board level. We always encourage our board members who share their own individual networks to promote any of our major fundraisers within their networks. You know, for some, that might be professional networks. For some, that might be their personal networks. For some, it might be both. But part of being a board member is utilizing those networks. And part of the reason for utilizing networks is to increase fundraising capacity. So I think the best thing that you can do, Sarah, really, at least what has worked really well for us, is make sure they feel educated on what those campaigns are, make sure they know what the funds are going toward, and make sure that they feel like they are armed with the right materials and messaging so that if they are talking to their network, they can feel comfortable and confident about making that ask.
That's really great advice. Thank you. Another question, this is for Xanika. How can an organization use text messaging for communications and giving?
That is another great question. The answer to that is really they can use it however they can come up with a good strategy and a good audience for doing so. And by that, I mean, it's always important to first segment your audience. And if you're ever thinking about sending a text message or really any piece of communication for that matter, first you should start by thinking about who are the recipients of this message and who is your audience. With text messages in particular, it doesn't exclusively fall into one demographic anymore. I think that that's something that people have thought for quite a while, that sending text messages is ineffective, especially to older demographics, but we're finding that that's not really the case anymore. But we do recommend starting with a smaller group of individuals when you send outbound messages, and then the content, once you know who you're communicating with, the content can kind of write itself. So if it's say a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign and you have, say, 15 volunteer fundraisers already signed up, they already know that they're in pretty deep communication with you guys, and it's definitely okay in that situation to send them text updates. So if it's something like, setting weekly goals for them in terms of what they should be fundraising for, I think a text message is a great use case there. Also in the lead up to an event. So say you have, 300 people coming to an outdoor luncheon and it's a little bit chilly or something, maybe you want to text those people a couple hours in advance to say, hey, please bring a jacket today. It might get a little bit chilly out on the lawn. And that's incredibly effective because text is really the best way that you're ensuring that people are receiving that message. Emails can go unread, especially a few hours prior to an event, but text messages, most of them are read, within the first 3 minutes. So really, I think the emphasis should be on the audience. And if they're expecting some kind of communication from you, then I think text message is a great platform for that.
Great, thank you. More great advice. All right, well, that's about all the time we have today. Thank you again to our wonderful presenters, and thank you all for attending. As I mentioned earlier, you will receive the webinar recording and slide presentations shortly. Stay tuned for our webinar next month when we cover the benefits of using Google AdWords grants to promote your organization's mission. Have a great day, everybody. Goodbye.